In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to use sample packs in order to learn music production and get better at it. This is a really cool mindset thing you could apply to a lot of things. This also works if you happen to have like stems of whatever song you want to use, because it gives you an insight onto how things are made, and it genuinely is very, very helpful. So what I'm going to be doing in this video, we're going to open up this sample pack. This is the Fox Stevenson Universal samples over from Splice. And this sample pack is a good example of this because it does have bass and melodic loops, and a lot of them actually go together to kind of form like a drop or a song idea. And I'm going to be showing you again how to use that in order to learn some really cool music production tricks. So I'm going to grab a couple of different loops that I know already go together, and I'll show you what they are. So these are the four we're going to be using. We have this chord loop, as well this little melody that goes over top it. We also have this lead melody, and this bass. So as you could hear, these are all part of the same song, and in a moment here I'm going to get into what exactly you can learn from this. First off, to tidy things up, because this will make sense in a bit, we're going to throw everything onto its own mixer. We are also going to grab a drum loop over from the same pack. So I'll just go ahead and drag this one over because that's a pretty good one. And now let's go ahead and get into like the lessons and what exactly you can learn from this. So first of all, the very first thing I want to demonstrate, we're going to put the chord loop over top of this. This lesson is going to be about how to make space in your mix and be able to like subtract elements in a good way, so that way your drop isn't too overcrowded. We already know this chord and this little build-up lead go together. But what happens if we overlay everything at the same time? So we're going to have our drop lead, our chords, our bass, and these drums. This is going to sound bad, but let me go ahead and show you that. As you could hear, this is really crunchy. There's nothing that's like out of key or wrong sounding, but everything is fighting for space right now. We also don't have sidechain, so our drums are going like super distorted when we hit the bass with them, and you can't really get like a clear definition of what's supposed to happen here. The bass is there, but it's not really in a space where it's like specifically like clear and able to be heard well, but not like fighting for more space. It's competing with those chords a lot. I want to show you what happens if we make space for it, just by subtracting an element. If we listen again to this chord sample here, this is really hungry, and it is full spectrum. What I mean by that, if we open up an EQ here, there's stuff over here in like the bass areas, there's mids, there's highs. This is like a full spectrum sound. And genuinely, in the drop, you don't need it, and this isn't going to lose any power. Watch how much more clear this drop will sound immediately if we just get rid of that. You're still getting that annoying distortion because we haven't sidechained yet, and I will fix that in a moment. But you see, we got rid of the chord patch, but the two melodic elements we still have left, this lead and the bass, are very good together. They're filling up all of that space. Remember before I showed full spectrum? Let's take a look at it again. You're going to see between these two elements, the entire frequency spectrum is pretty full. You have room up here, like this area, for your drums. Your bass is doing good stuff down below, and everything is nice and full. It doesn't miss those chords at all. There's a second thing you could learn from this. Let's say, for example, you really like kind of what this could sound like if you had the chords here, but it's still fighting for too much space. This is where you get to go ahead and learn about EQ. Let's go ahead and throw a Pro Q3 on this chord stack here. You could make this work a bit better if you, say, got rid of like the muddy low stuff over here. This doesn't need to exist because we have the bass doing that job. See? You could just make some space for it like this, because it's a very full sound usually. You can even go like up to here, and go ahead and turn it down a bit. Now you'll notice this will probably work there if we wanted to keep it. See, it's still there, it's just nice and quiet now, and it doesn't compete with the bass, and things sound good. Again, I did mention before sidechain. Let's go over that, because that's a super important thing to learn as well. Over here, you might notice at the top of my project, I do have these little triggers for the kick and the snare. What these are, if I zoom in nice and far, these are literally just kick samples that I've shortened to their smallest point. And same thing for the snare. I think I'm even using that same kick thing, it's just made unique, so it's a different instance. What I've done here, I have these on mixers 1 and 2. This is just my FL Studio template that I have set up for every single project. These are normally like this, meaning they're tied to the master. You could hear them like this. But I just go ahead and undo that, so that way they exist and they're able to be used as data, but they're not actually outputting any sound, because you don't want to hear these. And what I do is I put these wherever, like this one for kick, I put that wherever the kick is going to be, and for snare, I put that wherever the snare is going to be. So if we go ahead and move this over here to where we're bringing in our drums, I already have it in the same pattern as well, so if I copy and paste all the way around like this, you see this is following this perfectly. This is another thing that you could learn by listening to stems like this. You might have noticed this should have sounded good because we had all those elements, but because of that distortion, it was sounding really kind of harsh and bad. And here's how we go about fixing that. The way I usually like to do things, I like to create a new mixer channel over here and just call it SC or Sidechain, whatever, and put every element that's going to be sidechained on that. We definitely want this one. This is our lead. So we're going to route that over to it, like so. We definitely want this one too. We do not want the drums, because the drums are kind of what we want to stick through. If we were to sidechain the kick to the kick trigger, the kick would basically just disappear. We don't want that, so we're not going to sidechain our drums. I'll also go ahead and move over the things from before, even though they're not necessarily where the drums are going to be. So that way, if later in the track I wanted to introduce those, I could, and it would be fine. So now we have this here, and this is where you go about sidechaining. I have an in-depth sidechain tutorial on my channel, and as well I do have ways to do it with free FL Studio plugins. For me personally, I like to use a paid plugin known as ProMB, and I'll show you why, but you don't have to do it like this. If you own this, you just go into your processing tab over here, and you want to make sure on your mixer you select that kick sidechain trigger and sidechain it to whatever mixer you're on here. So that way it pops up in this menu as kick SC. And now we could go ahead and set up multi-band sidechain. This is so that way we could sidechain the values for our low end and high end separately. So I'm going to do anything below, like say 150 hertz right now, like this. And if you're kind of newer to music production and you don't know exactly what sidechain is doing, I could visualize this pretty well for you here with an oscilloscope. Sidechain is basically just ducking something when you tell it to. So for example, your kick and your bass exist in the same sort of frequency region. Like a kick is usually a pretty short thing of low end. You'll also have like top stuff, but that doesn't necessarily matter for this. And of course your bass is also like low end. So those two, if they're overlapping, it's not going to sound good. So you can see here, this looks pretty okay. If we were to exaggerate things a bit more, like up our release, that way you could very clearly hear the sidechain. You see our bass is disappearing and not coming in for a while. So that's a very exaggerated example of what sidechain does, like this. See that? So we're just trying to make it kind of more silent when our kick is playing, like so. So you just lower your release until it sounds good. You want to listen to the kick as well. I do a bit more than that, to be honest. And then we're going to do the same thing for our mids and highs. Now suddenly that works. Look what happens if we take off that sidechain. That sounds horrible. But this sounds good. And that's all just because of the kick distorting with everything else if we don't do that. I haven't even done the snare. But you would set that up the same exact way with another instance of that plugin. So that's another thing you could very easily learn just from sample packs. You see, these elements together sound good. When you go ahead and throw in drums though, it gets problematic until you clear out some space, like sidechaining or getting rid of things that don't need to be there. You could also learn a lot about sound design by listening to things too. Like, you'll often find file names will tell you what exactly a sound is. So this one we know, like if you're used to music production, you'll know already it's a saw patch. But let's say you didn't know that. The name will probably tell you, and then you could say, oh, if I wanted to try to recreate something a little bit like this, I could go ahead and say open serum, put that on another mixer track, and we want to try to get down that chord progression. So a little something like this. And we can compare that to what's here so far. The voicings are a little bit different, but we're going to go ahead and add some unison, like so. Also going to add one of these, because I'm noticing this little quality in here. some multiband compression. And you see, this is nowhere near perfect, but in a couple of seconds, we sort of got the same job done. You could learn a lot about sound design by doing things like this. Obviously, if we got like the voicings right, but that's a good way to go ahead and learn things. Same thing with the lead over here. I talked a little bit before about how to make space in a mix, but you'll notice this lead sound, which again, we'll compare it to the whole thing here. This sounds nice and full, but there's nothing piercing about it. There's no annoying frequencies. If we listen to that lead, you're gonna see there's not a lot of high end at all. A lot of times if you're designing a lead, you might have it sound like this. Just add a lot of high end like that, and it doesn't need that. That's something that I think a lot of mixes are held back by. They have really annoying high end. You'll see this lead doesn't have that, and it makes space for the cymbals of the drums. So like over here, this does have like high tops like that. You can see it over here. That lead is designed in a way to make space for that. Like that. And as well our bass, same kind of deal. There is information up there, but the majority of the sound is like your lows, your mids, and some high mids. And it's also a nice full sound, so that if you just had, say, drums and the bass playing, obviously it feels like it wants some more, but it is still pretty full. Those are just a few of the takeaways you could get from things like sample packs that have like full loops like this, or stems of existing tracks. This is definitely something you want to pick up, because you could learn so much from that. It's super useful. I hope you've taken away a few things from this video that are helpful. Let me know in the comment section below how you like to use stems and sample pack stuff as well. But if this video helps you out, please do drop a like, that does help me tremendously, and subscribe for future music production content from me. But thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.